All right, so one more thing, just to look at this outline. And like I said last class, the idea is if the uh, you do the discussion post. Also, if you can do this sign-in thing that we just finished doing, which I think is actually looking pretty good. So if you have those things, filling in the outline should be at least a little bit easier. So as far as the introduction goes, right, there's a statement. You're trying to come up with a broad statement about your traditional narrative, right? So I'm going to say something about higher education or college in America, some general thing. I need to find a way to bring in the narrative paradigm. So it might be something about how I need to look at the traditional narrative in terms of it being a story. Then I'm trying to find a thesis statement. This is one possible thesis statement, right? This idea that we're basically going to go through these three stages of the traditional narrative and discuss them. And so that's what this thesis is basically saying. Here's what happened with the traditional narrative. Here's how it came to be. Here's what it had in it, and here's how it spread, became dominant. So that's the set out for this. The trick is that you're trying to have that, but your focus needs to be on the sources, right? So the language that you're using needs to be on the articles themselves. Let me see if I can find the. All right, so this isn't actually my thesis. This is the topic sentence for my first, for what would be my first part of the essay, like my first main idea, because I'm talking about when it came into being. And I'm saying, okay, look through the narrative ones, and I might just pick the ones that have to do with how it came into being the most. In any event, so the thesis statement is supposed to be broad, like, okay, once if you use this narrative paradigm to look at this traditional narrative, here's what we learn, right? It came into being by this, it contained these things, and it was spread by this. So those are sort of the three big ideas, and that's what main idea 1, main idea 2, main idea 3 is. The importance of the function of the outline is to basically set it out in this format and then identify which articles you're going to be able to talk about in each little section, right? So the idea is you want to have a main article probably that supports whatever you're talking about, and then you want to have another article that you can bring in and compare it or contrast it to. You can also bring in the article about I'm trying to think of how that might work. The Fisher ones. I'm almost thinking the Fisher ones, once you do the Fisher theory, you explain it up in the introduction, then you're basically just using the language from it, and I'm not sure that you necessarily need to be using it again, right? Because it's basically here's what the theory is and so on. So you're gonna give a summary of the theory like you've done before. But then when you're dealing with your main ideas, you really want articles that are about the subject, right? So I'm talking about how college emerges, or how the traditional narrative about college emerges. So I need articles that talk about that. It would be very difficult for me to throw in something about the Fisher paradigm, right? I'm using it now, right? The theory is I'm actually using the paradigm and to talk about stuff, but so I'm not actually referring to it or comparing it to anything. I'm just sort of looking at everything through it, basically. All right. So my only other thing about the outline is just try to, I don't know, I would give shorter answers, right? You don't really need to write so much because you have to do the actual rough draft also. So I would basically use use the outline just to state an idea and then indicate which articles you're using, right? And maybe if you found a quote in those articles, throw that in there so that basically you could sit down and just type out, what you have in these 5 boxes. So you don't need to go too in depth with the outline, but it's just a way to sort of organize. It's like the next step of organization, right? Which you did on the past writing. So I would just say this is the place where you introduce and talk about, okay, I'm going to talk about this article, and here's a quote from it that I'm going to use, and I'm going to compare it to this other article. So that's what I would basically do. So you don't need to spend too much time developing it, right? Because you will just then write the rough draft and sort of flesh it out, I guess.